Maya Ellison walked into the courthouse early that morning with a calm but focused expression. She had been inside many courtrooms before, but today felt different. The air seemed heavier, filled with quiet whispers, shuffling feet, and the soft echo of doors opening and closing. She wasn't there for her own case. She had come to support her friend, Layla, who had a minor legal issue. Maya believed in showing up for people, especially when they felt nervous or alone. The courtroom was already half full when Maya found her seat. She chose a spot near the back, where she could see everything clearly. As she sat down, she looked around the room and studied the details the way she always did. The judge's bench stood tall at the front, polished and firm. Lawyers carried stacks of papers and exchanged quiet conversations. Officers stood near the doors, keeping watch over the flow of people. The subtle hum of waiting filled the space. Maya was used to observing people. She had always been the type who noticed small things, shifts in tone, tense shoulders, forced smiles. Maybe that was why she had become so drawn to community work. She liked helping people feel seen, heard, and respected. In her eyes, dignity mattered more than titles or uniforms. Layla was seated in the front row, waiting for her case to be called. She gave Maya a small wave and a grateful smile. Maya lifted her hand in return, offering reassurance without words. She wanted Layla to know she wasn't going through this alone. As the judge entered, everyone rose. The room instantly became quieter, almost as if someone had turned down the volume on the world. Judge Ramirez had a reputation for being fair and calm. He didn't raise his voice often, and he didn't rush through his cases. Maya respected that. A fair judge could change the entire atmosphere of a courtroom. The first few cases moved quickly. People stepped forward, answered questions, and sat back down with mixed expressions, some relieved, some disappointed, some confused. Maya listened closely, watching how the courtroom operated. Even though she wasn't a lawyer yet, she was studying law in school. She always used real-life settings as a chance to learn. Everything was fine until one particular moment. During a routine case, an officer giving testimony made a statement that didn't sound right to Maya. It wasn't a huge error, but it was enough to change the meaning of what had happened. Maya frowned slightly. She wasn't trying to cause trouble, but she had always believed the truth mattered, especially in places like courtrooms where small misunderstandings could create big problems. She quietly leaned toward the person next to her, a woman who had just asked what the officer meant. Maya softly explained the situation in simple terms. Her voice wasn't loud. It was calm, friendly, and meant for one person only. But in the silent courtroom, even a quiet explanation could draw attention. One of the officers standing near the wall turned his head and glanced toward Maya's row. His expression changed just slightly, tightening around the eyes. Maybe he thought she was interrupting, or maybe he misunderstood the situation. Whatever the reason, he began walking down the aisle toward her. Another officer followed behind him. Maya noticed their movement and felt a small wave of confusion. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had been respectful, quiet, and mindful. She straightened a little but kept her face relaxed. She had learned long ago that staying calm helped everyone around her stay calm too. When the officers reached her row, the first one asked her if there was a problem. His voice wasn't loud, but it held a tone that made several people turn their heads. Maya shook her head gently and explained that she had only answered a quick question from the woman beside her. Her voice remained polite, her hands resting on her lap. For a moment, it seemed like the conversation might end there. But the officer appeared unsatisfied. He asked her again, this time sounding as if he suspected she had broken some rule simply by speaking. Maya tried to assure him she had no intention of disrupting anything. She even pointed subtly to her friend in the front row to explain why she was present. Still, the officer didn't seem convinced. He signaled for her to stand. A soft ripple of whispering moved through the courtroom. People shifted in their seats, unsure of what was happening. Maya felt her heart beat a little faster. Not out of fear, but out of confusion. She had never been treated as if she was causing trouble by simply responding to another person's question. She tried again to calmly explain that she had not interrupted the court proceedings, but the officer insisted that she step outside. Maya worried that leaving the room might make it seem like she had done something wrong, and she didn't want her friend to worry. She glanced toward the judge's bench, hoping he might notice the situation. And he did. Judge Ramirez looked up from his papers, his gaze steady and direct. The entire room seemed to pause as he observed what was happening. His eyes moved from Maya to the officers and back again. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. But something about the way he watched made it clear he expected an explanation. The first officer straightened his posture and tried to justify why he had approached Maya. He said he believed she was speaking out of turn and disturbing the process. Maya listened quietly, hands by her sides, wishing she had the chance to clarify everything herself. Judge Ramirez listened, but his expression didn't change. He glanced at Maya. "Ma'am, did you raise your voice or interrupt the court?" he asked gently. Maya shook her head. "No, Your Honor," she said in a steady voice. "I only answered a quiet question from the person next to me. I did not intend to interrupt anything." Her tone was sincere, respectful, and clear. The judge nodded slowly. Several people in the room watched closely, waiting for what would happen next. The officers looked uncertain, unsure how the judge would respond. Judge Ramirez took a deep breath, then spoke in a calm but firm tone. He reminded everyone that the courtroom must remain a place of fairness, not tension. He explained that while order was important, assumptions should not be made lightly. The room remained completely silent. Even the air felt still. He then asked Maya to step forward, not to remove her, but to give her the opportunity to speak openly. The officers stepped aside, though they still appeared uneasy. As Maya walked down the aisle, her steps were slow and steady. She kept her expression neutral, though she felt 1,000 thoughts moving through her mind. She had not expected any of this when she walked into the courthouse. She had only come to support a friend. When she reached the front, the judge gestured toward a small area near the bench where she could stand comfortably. He asked her to describe exactly what happened. In clear, simple language, she explained the misunderstanding. She made sure not to sound accusing or emotional. She simply told the truth as it happened. The judge listened closely. He thanked her for her honesty and calm behavior. His voice carried a sense of respect that made the room feel steadier, more balanced. The moment he acknowledged her, something changed in the atmosphere. The tension that had built up slowly dissolved. People seemed to relax slightly. Even Layla turned around and smiled with relief when she saw Maya was fine. The judge addressed the officers next, but he did so calmly. He reminded them of their responsibility to maintain order without assuming wrongdoing. His words weren't harsh. They were thoughtful. He wanted them to understand that authority worked best when paired with fairness. Once everything was cleared up, he invited Maya to remain near the front for a moment. He said he appreciated her clarity and calm handling of the situation. Maya nodded respectfully, grateful that things were returning to normal. But she didn't yet realize that this small moment, this quiet misunderstanding, would be the spark that changed everything that followed. In that simple courtroom, surrounded by people who had come for their own separate reasons, a single misunderstanding was about to lead Maya down a path she never expected. A path that would bring her closer to justice, closer to her purpose, and closer to a role she never imagined stepping into. And all of it began with a soft conversation, a misunderstood moment, and a judge who paid attention. Maya stood near the front of the courtroom, still a little surprised by everything that had just happened. She hadn't expected the judge to ask her to come forward or to speak directly to him, but she appreciated how respectfully he handled the situation. The room felt different now, quieter, but more aware. People were watching more closely, paying attention not just to the cases but to the atmosphere and the balance inside the room. Judge Ramirez took a moment to review his notes before addressing the room again. He didn't rush. His calm presence seemed to settle everyone, like a deep breath after a moment of confusion. Maya stood with her hands folded in front of her, trying to remain steady even though her heart was still beating a little faster than usual. After a long pause, he spoke. "This courtroom must always remain a place where everyone feels safe and respected," he said. His voice carried gently, but clearly across the room. "Misunderstandings happen, but we handle them with clarity and calmness." Many people nodded quietly. Even those who didn't know Maya could sense she hadn't meant any disruption. The judge's tone made it clear that fairness mattered above everything else. He turned to Maya again. "Thank you for explaining the situation with honesty," he said. Maya nodded respectfully. She didn't say anything more, but she felt relieved. She had always believed in peaceful communication, and it seemed that belief was helping her now. The judge then asked her a few more questions, not because she was in trouble, but because he wanted to understand the entire context. Maya answered each question clearly and calmly. She explained why she had spoken quietly with the woman next to her, and how she had been careful not to disturb the proceedings. With each answer, Maya felt the weight in her chest lighten. She could feel the energy in the room shifting, almost as if people were silently learning from the moment. Sometimes, she thought, simple truth could teach more than long speeches. Once the judge was satisfied that everything had been clarified, he surprised everyone, including Maya, by asking her to move to the side of the bench. It wasn't the judge's chair, but it was a place closer to where he worked. "I'd like you to stay near for a few minutes," he said softly. "You handled the moment with calmness, and I want to make sure everything remains clear." Maya blinked in surprise. She wasn't used to being so close to the front in a courtroom unless she was helping with community cases outside. She walked to the side area, unsure what to expect, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. She didn't want to seem nervous or overwhelmed. From this new position, she could see everything from a different angle: the lawyers flipping through papers, the officers standing near the doors, the people waiting for their turn. She noticed that many of them were watching her now, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, and even a bit of admiration. Judge Ramirez continued with the next case, but he handled each person even more gently than usual. It was as if the earlier incident reminded him to double-check that everyone felt heard. He asked questions with patience, and carefully listened to each response. Maya observed closely. She found herself learning more than she ever had sitting in the back. Every detail felt valuable: the way the judge phrased questions, the way he guided confused individuals, the respectful tone he used even when someone seemed unsure. She admired his balance of authority and empathy. As she watched, a few lawyers approached her quietly during breaks. They greeted her politely, some offering small smiles of encouragement. One whispered, "You handled that very well." Maya thanked them, but kept her focus on the ongoing cases. She didn't want the judge to feel she was distracted. She wanted to show that she took this position seriously, even though she didn't fully understand why she had been asked to stand there. After a few more cases, Judge Ramirez paused again. He leaned slightly toward Maya and asked in a low voice, "Are you studying law?" She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm in my second year." He smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried understanding. "I thought so," he said. "Your composure and clarity remind me of someone who studies the principles behind the process." Maya felt her cheeks warm, but she managed to stay composed. She wasn't used to receiving compliments from judges, not directly, anyway. Most judges she had seen were too busy or too distant. The judge continued, "There will come moments in your career where you'll be tested in unexpected ways. Today gave you a small preview." Maya absorbed the words carefully. She knew he wasn't referring to the misunderstanding itself, but to the way she had handled it. She had remained calm under pressure, spoken truthfully, and communicated respectfully, qualities that mattered in any courtroom. Before she could respond, the judge reached for a file and handed it to her. "Would you mind reviewing this for a moment?" he asked gently. Maya looked at the file, surprised but not intimidated. She opened it and found notes about the earlier situation, the misunderstanding, the officer's statements, and her explanation. It seemed the judge wanted to ensure everything was properly documented. She reviewed it carefully, reading each sentence slowly. She didn't change anything. She wasn't in a place to do that, but she looked over it with the same care she used when helping community members understand legal forms. When she finished, she closed the file and handed it back. "Everything looks accurate," she said softly. The judge nodded with appreciation. Thank you. He placed the file aside and returned to the proceedings. But the atmosphere in the room had shifted even more now. People seemed more attentive, more respectful, as if they realized they were witnessing something unusual. A moment where fairness took the lead, and where an ordinary citizen was treated with dignity and trust. Not long after, a brief recess was called. The judge needed to meet privately with courthouse staff to clarify protocols and ensure future misunderstandings were prevented. Before stepping away, he looked at Maya and said, "Stay here. You're not in trouble, and you're not being questioned. This is just to maintain clarity." Maya nodded. She watched as the judge walked into his chambers with a few staff members. The doors closed behind them, leaving a soft quiet in the room. People began whispering among themselves, but the tone was different from before. Some seemed impressed. Others were curious. A few even smiled at Maya as they walked past, as if silently cheering her on. She remained where she was asked to stay, calm and steady. Her mind was full of thoughts, but not anxious ones, more like reflections. She thought about her studies, her goals, her reasons for entering law school. She had always wanted to help people understand their rights and navigate confusing systems, but she had never imagined being in this position, standing near the judge's bench, reviewing files, and observing the inner workings of a courtroom from up close. She wondered what her professors would say if they knew about this. She wondered how Layla was feeling. She wondered how this moment might change her future. The officers who had approached her earlier now stood farther back, their posture a bit more thoughtful. They were not upset, just reflective. They seemed to understand that the situation had been a misunderstanding that could happen to anyone. One of them gave a small nod to Maya, a quiet gesture, maybe an unspoken apology. Maya nodded back politely, appreciating the gesture without needing any long explanation. While she waited, she noticed the journalists outside the courtroom, looking through the glass panel in the door. They had clearly sensed something unusual was happening. Courthouses always attracted attention, but today that attention felt sharper. Maya took a deep breath and reminded herself that staying calm was the most important thing. She didn't want to draw unnecessary attention or appear overwhelmed. She just wanted to handle the moment with dignity. After several minutes, the judge returned. His calm presence filled the room again. He resumed his place at the bench and thanked everyone for their patience. Then, he turned to Maya once more. "You have demonstrated responsibility, clarity, and patience today," he said. "Please remain for the next step. I would like you to help document what happened, so we ensure every detail is accurate and fair." Maya felt a small shift inside herself. Something gentle, but important. She wasn't being pulled away. She wasn't being questioned. She was being trusted. She stepped forward again, ready for whatever came next. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to sit closer to justice than she ever had before, closer than most law students ever could this early in their journey. And the next moments would change everything. Maya took a slow breath as she moved toward the small side chair near the judge's seat. She still could not fully understand how the situation had shifted from a simple misunderstanding to something that placed her at the center of attention. But she reminded herself to remain calm. Calmness had helped her through everything so far, and it would help her now too. The chair she sat in was not the official judge's seat, but it was close enough that she could see almost everything the judge could see: the papers, the computer screen, the neatly arranged files, and even the view of the entire courtroom. It felt strange to be there, but not uncomfortable. It felt more like she had stepped into a space where responsibility mattered. Judge Ramirez stood at the bench sorting through documents. He spoke quietly with a staff member, and although Maya couldn't hear their words clearly, she could sense the seriousness and order in their tone. They didn't seem stressed, they were simply focused. When he finished organizing the papers, he turned slightly toward Maya and gave her a small nod. "You can begin looking over the documents on your left," he said. "These are witness notes from individuals who observed what happened earlier. Please review them so we can keep the record clear." Maya nodded and turned to the stack. There were only a few statements, handwritten or typed. each describing what the witnesses believed they saw. As she read through the first one, she felt a warm sense of gratitude. The witness had written kindly about her, explaining that she had only spoken quietly and did not disturb the court proceedings. The second witness described the moment the officers approached her, but in calm, neutral language. They focused more on the misunderstanding than on any tension. Maya appreciated the tone. It made the situation easier to understand without turning it into something dramatic. She read each statement slowly, making sure to understand every detail. She didn't want to rush, because she knew the judge trusted her judgment. That trust meant something to her, something deep. Meanwhile, the courtroom itself grew quieter, more reflective. People watched Maya, but their expressions were soft and respectful. They were seeing something unusual. Not a conflict, but a moment where fairness and communication were being shown so clearly that it left an impression. As Maya finished reading the last witness statement, the judge returned to his seat. He adjusted his glasses and folded his hands in front of him. "Have you finished reviewing the statements?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," she answered. They all seemed consistent. Everyone described the same misunderstanding. "I didn't find any confusion in what they wrote." The judge nodded in appreciation. "Thank you," he said. "Clarity is important. Transparency helps prevent future issues, and your presence is helping with that today." Maya felt a quiet pride inside her chest. Not a pride that made her feel superior, but one that made her feel useful. She had always believed in helping others, and now she was doing that in a setting she respected deeply. The judge turned to the courtroom. "We will continue with today's schedule," he announced. "Miss Ellison will be assisting with documentation." The way he said it was respectful and calm, not dramatic. But it still made the room shift into a more attentive state. People knew this was something they didn't normally see. As the next cases began, Maya watched with interest. She observed how the judge handled each person. He spoke gently to those who were nervous. He explained things clearly to those who didn't understand. He listened patiently to everyone, even when they seemed confused or unsure. Maya took small notes on a legal pad, writing simple observations to help the documentation stay accurate. She wrote about tone, timing, and clarity. Not about mistakes, but about the process. She wanted her notes to help if future questions arose. During a brief pause, the judge leaned slightly toward her and said quietly, "You have a natural sense for this work." Maya looked at him, surprised. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said softly. "I try to stay calm and pay attention." He nodded. "Calmness is rare. Many people react quickly when something unexpected happens. You responded with clarity instead. That is valuable in this field." Maya felt the words settle inside her. They weren't ordinary compliments. They felt like guidance, like someone placing a small light on a path she had already been walking but hadn't fully seen yet. As the next case was called, a young man stepped forward looking extremely nervous. His hands shook slightly as he tried to speak. The judge noticed and softened his tone even more. "Take your time," he said. "This is a conversation, not a test." The young man nodded and gathered his thoughts. Maya watched him closely, feeling a quiet empathy. She remembered how her community work often brought her into contact with people who felt nervous about formal settings. Courtrooms could be intimidating even when nothing serious was at stake. While the judge spoke with the young man, Maya reviewed a few more documents. She helped organize the papers on the left side of the bench, making sure that anything the judge needed would be easy to reach. She didn't touch anything she wasn't asked to handle, but she kept the area neat. She felt like part of a team, even though she wasn't officially one. She felt connected to the purpose of the room, to fairness, to clarity, to guidance. As the morning continued, whispers outside the courtroom grew louder. Reporters were waiting, trying to understand what was happening inside. They couldn't see clearly through the frosted glass, but they sensed that something unusual was unfolding. Inside, though, the atmosphere was calm. The energy felt thoughtful, steady, and almost inspiring. During another short pause in the schedule, the judge stepped away briefly to discuss security procedures with the chief courthouse officer. While he was gone, The courtroom remained quiet, but everyone's attention slowly shifted toward Maya again. She didn't seem nervous. She sat with her back straight, her notes neatly in front of her, her hands folded gently on her lap. She appeared focused not on the attention she was getting, but on the responsibility she had been given. Some people smiled at her. Some whispered to their neighbors with curious expressions. Even a few officers exchanged soft glances, as if reminding themselves to stay thoughtful and understanding. After several minutes, the judge returned. He thanked the room for their patience and resumed the proceedings. But before moving forward, he glanced at Maya again. "Would you be comfortable reviewing one more set of documents?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," she said immediately. He handed her another small folder. This one included internal notes from the courthouse staff describing the timeline of the earlier misunderstanding and the steps taken afterward. Maya read through them carefully, appreciating the professional tone. Everyone had tried to describe things clearly, without adding unnecessary emotion. As she finished reading, she realized something important. This moment wasn't really about her being in the judge's seat. It was about the system showing that fairness could adapt when needed. It was about transparency, clarity, and respect. But it was also about trust. Trust the judge placed in her, trust she placed in the process, and trust the witnesses placed in honesty. When the judge asked her if everything looked consistent, she nodded. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "Everything matches the earlier notes." The judge looked satisfied. "Good," he said. "Thank you for your help today." The way he said it made Maya feel truly appreciated. Not just seen, but recognized. She wasn't someone who needed praise, but she valued sincerity deeply. As the final cases of the morning wrapped up, the judge took a slow breath and prepared to call for a longer break. Before doing so, he looked at Maya again. "You handled yourself with grace today," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Please stay here during the break. I'll need your help arranging the final documentation." Maya nodded, steady and composed. She had no idea what the next moments would bring. She didn't know that her presence was becoming symbolic to the people in the room. She didn't know her calmness was inspiring others to reflect. All she knew was that she was sitting in a place she had never imagined, so close to the center of fairness, so close to the structure she respected. And even though she wasn't the judge, for a few quiet minutes, she felt the weight and meaning of the judge's seat. She didn't know it yet. But this moment was only the beginning of something much bigger. Maya remained in the small chair beside the judge's bench as the courtroom emptied for the midday break. Most people stepped outside to stretch, talk quietly in the hallway, or get something to drink. But inside the courtroom, the air still carried a soft tension, the kind that stayed after something surprising had happened. The door closed softly behind the last person, leaving Maya in a room that suddenly felt much larger. She took a slow breath and glanced around. Without the usual crowd, the benches looked long and empty. The walls, decorated with simple framed laws and guidelines, seemed taller. Even the quiet buzz of the air conditioner sounded clearer. She looked down at her notes, reading them again to make sure everything was accurate. She didn't want to miss even a small detail. She had been trusted with this responsibility, and she valued that trust more than anything she had felt in a long time. Just then, Judge Ramirez re-entered the courtroom. He walked in with a calm but thoughtful expression, carrying a folder under his arm. When he reached the bench, he set it down gently and looked at Maya. "Thank you for waiting," he said. "Of course, Your Honor," she replied. He adjusted his sleeves and sat down. "I'd like to go over the documentation now. We need to ensure it's complete, so the courthouse management can review everything properly." Maya nodded and straightened the pages in front of her. She knew this was important. Not just for the record, but for the lesson the situation could teach about understanding and fairness. Before they began, a quiet knock sounded at the door. A courthouse administrator stepped inside, with a polite nod to both of them. "Your Honor, Internal Affairs is here," she said gently. "They're requesting to review the reports." Maya felt her breath catch slightly. She wasn't scared, only surprised. Internal Affairs handled professional standards and internal reviews. Their presence meant the courthouse wanted a clear understanding of the entire situation, from start to finish, every detail, every decision, every conversation. The judge nodded. "Please bring them in." A few moments later, 2 internal affairs officers entered the courtroom. Their expressions were calm and professional. They carried notebooks and tablets, prepared to document everything. Maya sat up straighter, wanting to appear steady and helpful. "Thank you for coming," the judge said. "We're making sure the record is complete." One of the officers smiled kindly and said, "We appreciate that, Your Honor." "And Miss Ellison?" He nodded to Maya. "Thank you for remaining here. We understand you witnessed the earlier misunderstanding." Maya nodded politely but did not interrupt. She waited for them to guide the process. The officers began by reviewing the written statements. They read them slowly, taking quiet notes. Every once in a while, they looked up, as if considering something carefully. Their tone remained calm, respectful, and thoughtful. When they finished reading, one of them asked Maya gently, "Can you describe the moment as you experienced it?" "In your own words." Maya spoke with the same steady clarity she had used earlier. She explained the situation briefly, and simply just the facts. Without adding emotion or opinion, she wanted the record to reflect truth, not personal feelings. The officers thanked her, impressed by her calm explanation. They then spoke with the judge, asking a few procedural questions. Everything was handled in a peaceful and orderly way. No one raised their voice. No one acted impatient. It felt like a group of people working together for understanding. After several minutes, the internal affairs officers nodded with satisfaction. "Thank you, Your Honor. Everything is in order," one said. "We'll take this information to our department." Before leaving, they gave Maya another respectful nod. It made her feel appreciated for her honesty and presence. When they left the room, the judge exhaled quietly, almost as if he could finally relax after a long morning. "You've been very helpful, Miss Ellison," he said. "Not everyone handles unexpected situations this calmly." Maya smiled softly. "I only tried to stay honest," she said. "That's exactly what makes a good legal professional," the judge replied. As he organized the papers on his desk, Maya found her eyes drifting around the courtroom again. Something was changing, not outside, but inside herself. She felt more confident, but also more grounded. She realized that this morning had taught her something important about courage. Courage wasn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it was quiet. Sometimes, it was simply choosing to stay steady when you felt out of place. A few minutes later, the doors opened again as journalists were given permission to enter. They had been waiting all morning to understand the unusual situation inside. Cameras were not allowed in the courtroom, but notebooks and pens filled their hands. The judge addressed them calmly, explaining that the situation had been a misunderstanding, handled respectfully and professionally. He emphasized that the courthouse valued fairness and clarity. He did not dramatize the situation. Instead, he described it as an example of how communication could prevent confusion. The journalists took notes quickly, some looking surprised that the story was more about calmness and honesty than conflict. Others seemed impressed that Maya had been invited to assist so closely. One reporter asked the judge, "Is this the first time a civilian has been asked to help with documentation like this?" The judge glanced at Maya and replied, "It is rare. But when someone shows fairness, clarity, and responsibility, I believe it's worth acknowledging." The reporter nodded with a curious smile. Another asked Maya if she was comfortable speaking. Maya remained polite. "I'm grateful for the judge's trust," she said simply. "I was only trying to help and to stay calm." Her words were gentle, but they carried sincerity. The journalists sensed that sincerity. They wrote quickly, capturing her calm presence in every sentence. After the reporters left, the judge turned to Maya once more. "Take a short break," he said kindly. "You've been working nonstop." Maya nodded and stepped out into the hallway. She didn't go far, just enough to stretch her legs and clear her thoughts. The hallway buzzed quietly with people talking about what had happened that morning. Some recognized her and offered small nods of support, Layla approached her with wide eyes. "Maya," she whispered, "I cannot believe what is happening." "You're practically working with the judge," Maya laughed softly. "I'm just helping with documentation," she said. But even she knew the moment meant more than that. Layla squeezed her hand. "You handled everything so well." After a few minutes, Maya returned to the courtroom. The judge had a few final notes he wanted her to look at before they wrapped up the review. As she read through the last portion of documents, Maya felt a deeper understanding settle inside her. She wasn't simply helping with papers. She was participating in accountability, fairness, and transparency values she cared about deeply. Finally, the judge collected all the files into a single folder and placed it in his briefcase. "That will be all for today," he said. "Thank you again. You contributed more than you realize." Maya felt a warm appreciation in her heart. "I'm glad I could help, Your Honor." Before she left, the judge added softly, "I hope you continue in your studies. You have a natural gift for balance and clarity. People with those qualities are greatly needed." Maya left the courtroom with a quiet smile. She felt lighter, stronger, and inspired. She knew this day would stay with her for a long time. It had tested her composure, challenged her confidence, and revealed a side of justice she hadn't seen up close before. She walked down the courthouse steps into the fresh air, thinking about everything that had happened. She had come that morning only to support her friend. But she was leaving with a sense of purpose she had never felt so clearly. She didn't know how the story would grow, or how people would react when they heard it, but she knew she had acted with truth and calmness, and that was enough. But the day wasn't over. The story had already begun spreading, and soon, more people would be asking questions. More conversations would begin. More attention would turn toward what had happened in that quiet courtroom, and without realizing it, Maya had become the center of a moment that would reach far beyond the courthouse walls. Maya returned home that evening with a quiet mind, but her heart carried a weight that only courage could lift. The past few days had brought more attention to her than she ever asked for. People from across the city had seen the videos, read the reports, and talked about how calmly she handled herself in the courtroom. Some people called her brave. Others called her a symbol of hope. But Maya never saw herself that way. She saw herself simply as someone who did not want wrong things to continue unnoticed. She spent many nights thinking about the next steps she should take. She did not want trouble for anyone. She believed in peaceful solutions, respectful communication, and honest systems. Still, she felt she had a responsibility to speak up, not only for herself but for many people who stayed quiet because they feared they would not be heard. Her family supported her completely. Her mother, who had always been a steady voice in her life, reminded her that real change comes from calm strength. Her younger brother told her that her story inspired students at his school, who admired how she had stayed balanced in a challenging place. Their love gave Maya confidence to begin the next chapter of her journey. Soon, community groups began reaching out to her. They invited her to join meetings, share her experience, and offer suggestions on how the court system could become safer and more welcoming for everyone. At first, Maya felt nervous. She was used to helping people quietly in the background, not speaking in front of large groups. But every time she stood up to speak, she remembered how she felt in the courtroom that day, steady, aware, and connected to something bigger than herself. During one meeting, an older woman from the community gently placed her hand on Maya's and said, "You didn't raise your voice, but your message was loud enough. You reminded us that respect matters, even in the hardest moments." Those words stayed with Maya. They gave her the strength to keep going. Another major step came when Maya decided to file a formal request for review, not to punish anyone, but to encourage fairness and better training. She made her intentions clear. She wanted her request to be a peaceful call for more balance, kindness, and accountability. She hoped it would help create systems where everyone felt safe. The city officials took her request seriously. They met with her personally to understand her ideas. She spoke calmly and respectfully, explaining how small improvements could make big differences for many people. Her thoughtful approach impressed them. Within a few weeks, a detailed review began. Teams of trained professionals stepped in to examine how communication could be improved in courtrooms, how staff could be better supported, and how future situations could be handled with more understanding. Meanwhile, the media continued following her story. Reporters wanted to interview her. She accepted only a few invitations, choosing platforms where she could speak in a gentle, meaningful way instead of dramatic soundbites. She talked about fairness, kindness, and the importance of listening. She reminded viewers that solutions grow from cooperation, not conflict. Her calm presence made people listen. She became a reminder that strength does not always look loud or forceful. It can also be steady, patient, and wise. As months passed, Maya refocused on finishing law school. Even though her days were busy, she moved through her studies with a fresh passion. Every lecture, every assignment, every discussion brought her closer to her goal. She dreamed of becoming someone who could help people understand the legal world, especially those who felt overwhelmed or unheard. Her professors noticed the change in her. One of them, Professor Daniels, told her, "Great lawyers don't just know the law, they understand people. You already have both. Keep going, Maya." Those words lit a spark in her heart. She worked hard, often staying late in the library, reading quietly while others went home. Her classmates sometimes teased her for studying too much. But they also admired her determination. Many of them had seen the news about her. To them, she became a reminder that real life and the law were deeply connected. When graduation day arrived, Maya's family and friends filled the room with cheers. Her mother cried happy tears as Maya walked across the stage in her gown. It was not just a moment of academic achievement, it was the beginning of the life she had always dreamed of. A few months later, Maya passed her final exam and officially became a licensed legal advocate. On the day she received her certificate, she held it close to her chest, whispering a quiet promise to use her knowledge gently and wisely. Her first official visit as a legal advocate was to the same courthouse where everything had happened. She entered the building with steady steps, feeling a sense of completion. The staff recognized her and greeted her warmly. People who once saw her as a visitor now saw her as a professional. Judge Ramirez invited her into his chambers for a brief conversation. He smiled as she walked in, and there was a quiet pride in his eyes. "Maya," he said warmly, "I have watched your journey closely. Your calm leadership has encouraged many people, not only in this courthouse, but throughout the whole community." Maya thanked him gracefully. She felt honored to receive such sincere words from someone she respected deeply. The judge continued, "You handled a difficult moment with grace. And now, you are stepping into a position where you can help many people. That is something to be proud of." After their conversation, Maya stepped into the courtroom, a familiar place that now felt completely different. Instead of sitting in the back, she took her place among the legal professionals. People looked at her with a mixture of respect, admiration, and quiet gratitude. She had come full circle. In the months that followed, Maya worked with many clients. She listened to their stories with care and guided them with patience. She believed everyone deserved to feel safe, understood, and respected. She helped people from all walks of life, parents, students, workers, and even those who had lost hope in the system. Her gentle approach made people trust her quickly. Her story continued to influence the city. Community groups and officials worked together to introduce new guidelines, workshops, and support programs. These improvements helped courthouse staff communicate better, manage stressful situations more calmly, and create a welcoming environment for visitors. People felt the difference. Slowly but surely, the courthouse became known not as a place of fear, but as a place of fairness. None of this happened overnight, but Maya's journey had started a movement based on understanding and cooperation. What began as a quiet moment in a courtroom had grown into a path of positive change for many. Maya often reflected on everything that had happened. She felt grateful for the challenges she faced because they shaped her into someone stronger and more compassionate. She also felt grateful for the people who supported her along the way. The judge, her family, her teachers, her classmates, and the strangers who believed in her. One evening, as she packed up her files after a long day of work, She looked at the empty courtroom. Sunlight was gently fading through the tall windows. The room felt peaceful, almost symbolic, like a reminder of how far she had come. She smiled softly to herself. The seat she had briefly occupied months ago, the judge's seat, had become a meaningful symbol in her life. Not a symbol of power, but a symbol of responsibility, fairness, and hope. And though she never planned to sit in that seat again, she carried its lesson with her every day. She understood now that real change doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens in small steps, through kindness, through courage, through calm voices that choose understanding over anger. Maya walked out of the courthouse with a sense of purpose. Her journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Her heart was steady, her mind was clear, and her future was bright. She had become exactly what she hoped to be: a gentle force for fairness, a guiding light in her community, a believer in peaceful change.